Britt Cobb is a graphic designer based in New York City. After graduating from NC State College of Design, North Carolina, where I also represent from, he applied for a position at Pentagram to work with partner Michael Beirut. He got the job and sits in the same seat today. In 2015, he was named associate partner of the firm. Some of his clients include Slack, the Obama Foundation, Metropolitan Transport Authority, Verizon, and he recently designed an autobiographical book for pop star Justin Timberlake. So I'd like to give a warm welcome to Britt Cobb. And Britt, you can go ahead and take it away.
So hi, I'm Britt. I'm from the New York office of Pentagram. I joined 10 years ago, straight out of school. And as my bio said, I never left. I started working with Michael Beirut right after school as an intern. And he's a great guy to work for. And he's the reason I stick around for so long. But yeah, so our team looks like this these days. So there are 14 total members to our team. You're only seeing 12 here. 2 are missing. Chris and Latesy are missing. But here we are at the end of last year when it was still okay to stand with people within 6 feet, and also you can even put your arms around them. So here we are upstate in Hyde Park at the Culinary Institute, standing in front of Lou Dorfman's gastro-typographical assemblage wall, right? Which was originally in the CBS building in Midtown Manhattan. So we made a field trip of it towards the end of last year. And you can take a tour of the Culinary Institute, and they'll show you what kitchens look like and what students wear and their aprons and everything. But at the very end of the tour, they take you here. And I think most people just walk right past it and say, oh, that's kind of an interesting wall. But our team's stuck there for about an hour just taking pictures and selfies and stuff. So that is to say, our team is obsessed with typography. So I'm happy to be talking to Monotype about some projects we have going on. A lot of them have to do with typography. And so just to give you a little sense of the work that our team does, just to kind of give you an idea too about the structure of Pentagram, there are 10 partners that make up the New York office, and each partner has their own team of designers and coordinators, and the partner can choose to have a big team, small team, they can hire who they want, and they run their own show. So even though Pentagram is perceived as a big organization, we're over 100 in terms of designers, but they're all broken up into smaller teams. And that small team is like what I showed you earlier, just a team of about 10 designers total. But to give you an idea of the work that we work on, these are some projects I've worked on. We work on big identities, identity systems for large tech companies or even small nonprofit companies. We do environmental signage, environmental graphic signage and wayfinding. We design books of all sorts. We do a lot of print design, we design magazines, and for all sorts of clientele. And then we just do good old-fashioned graphic design sometimes. Sometimes we just design graphics for events for our friends or for organizations we're associated with. So I want to talk to you today about a very specific client that we have. It's a unique one to Pentagram. A lot of our work tends to be, we're commissioned and hired to do a single type of job, you know, like refresh an identity or design a book or create a signage program for a school or something. But in this case, we have an ongoing relationship with a company. And I want to take a moment and kind of poll the audience to see if they know what brand. You guys are very acute to recognizing brands. I'm curious if anyone knows what brand this might be. And so maybe see if you can maybe respond in the chat channel.
Yep. And Britt, we're seeing a lot of people coming in with Verizon in the chat window.
All right, ding, 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 you're right. So that's nice to hear, because our work with Verizon is we're constantly trying to figure out how far we can push the brand. And James talked earlier with the Coke bottle. He really shows you how a brand can be stretched and expanded. And with Verizon, it's still kind of early days with this rebrand that we actually did 5 years ago. But we're still sort of stretching and feeling out how exactly can we push the brand in different ways. It's a different brand than Coca-Cola. Coca-Cola has a little bit more ability to stretch their visual language. Verizon keeps it pretty tight. But so in 2015, we were approached by the then new chief marketing officer at Verizon, Diego Scotti, who approached our partner, Michael Beirut, about taking a look at a logo that he sort of suddenly became responsible for, which is the old Verizon logo. And he figured, Diego said, I'm not being asked to redesign the logo. I just figured why, I've got some available funds to try this out. Well, let's you and I work on a project on the side and see if we can maybe update this thing. So this is the Verizon logo that is slowly disappearing from our planet. Thank the Lord. And the kind of, at that time, before the redesign and work with Verizon, the world of Verizon and its brand and its many extensions were a mess. They were sort of going everywhere. And there was no real overarching system that sort of tied everything together. And it was a bit of a free-for-all. And I'm going to avoid showing you packaging and old promotional materials because it only gets worse from here. But just take it from us, it was a satisfying process to work with the Verizon team and coming up with a brand new identity for them, which is all about tightening up the system and giving people the opportunity, the people who are agency partners like Pentagram is, and there are about a dozen of them that work with Verizon, give them the tools to really execute in a consistent way. And in this case where Verizon had a lot of trouble, so we had to give them some help and clean things up. And so I'm going to walk you through the ingredients, and there are 3 simple ingredients here. One is the logo, the master brand mark, and that check mark that we're trying to kind of like, we're still, even though, we've been working with it for about 5 years now, we're still trying to figure out when should we use it, when shouldn't we use it, when should we tweak it, all that sort of stuff. We're all trying to figure it out. And I should say that in the redesign of the identity in 2015 went well. The logo changed, but they also asked us to stay on board kind of on a retainer basis to just kind of help them. Initially was to guide them through the rollout of the identity and make sure that everything's executed properly. But then now over the course of a few years, they're asking us, okay, so we have this new initiative. Can you help us design this? And how is it different, or how is it the same as the Verizon brand? So I guess it's part of something to think about is brands are constantly evolving. They're never static, and you never have one perfect solve for everything. And even though big, large brands and corporations, telecommunications companies like Verizon are still sort of figuring out how their brand lives and breathes in this world. So then they have 3 simple colors, black, white, and red, used at various degrees, various percentages, right? And then previously it was a lot of red, and now we're dialing it down to maybe 10, 15%, really low percentage. But here's the color palette. And then the thing that really ties it all together, and I think is actually, now I'm trained to recognize typefaces from different brands, but I think this is almost as important as the logo itself, and that's the use of Neue Hausgrutesk, their house typeface. And Neue Hausgrutesk was redrawn by Christian Schwartz years ago, and his idea, and Neue Hausgrutesk is the same thing as Helvetica, of course. But the idea was that Christian wanted to go back to the original source drawings of Max Meidinger, the designer of Neue Hausgrutesk, and sort of resurrect all those early quirky moments that the typeface had, and he sort of created what was the original Helvetica, resurrecting it back to life. And we use it exclusively with Verizon, and the Swiss style of flush left, packed in tight, make it big. That's sort of our MO with them, and I'm fine with doing that. So whenever we help them launch the rebrand, designers can relate to this. Oftentimes when you set a set of guidelines off to a client, whether or not they've been around for a long time, they're used to doing this sort of thing, or if they're a startup with no designer on staff, you're always worried about how's it going to go? Whenever these are left in other people's hands, other designers' hands, is my original vision for the identity going to hold up? And in the case of Verizon, they were true disciples of the brand guidelines that we set. And they are so consistent with how well they use typography, imagery, and layout and grids that it's insane. I've never had a client that's so adamant about sticking to their guidelines. And part of that is we think it has to do with the fact that Verizon's originally comprised of a bunch of engineers, right? And we thought, well, if you give engineers some rules, they're going to stick to them. So they really have stuck with it. And a lot of the work that we're doing now is 5 years after resetting the brand is wondering, okay, so they've done a really good job of keeping things consistent. Now, how can we mix things up? How can we make it exciting? How can we kind of relieve the brand of the grid, right? And how can we give it some personality? If you follow the grid too hard, you start to look a bit boring and stale. So we're trying to help them move beyond that. So I'll show you some sample work. Some of it's fake, some of it's real, some of it's ours, some of it's other agencies, but just give you a flavor of the type of stuff we work on. If you receive something in the mail from Verizon or you see something in a magazine, chances are we sort of set a standard for what that looks like. And you can tell here, this is like classic Swiss style, right? Where's your grid? Make sure, play up that negative space. Make sure it's locked into the corners, lock it in tight. So this is like our starting point with everything for them. It's not only just like small things that mailers that arrive in your mail. We also help them with big event graphics. So if their CEO is giving a big keynote address, we'll sort of, depending on the topic at hand he's talking about, we'll help them with the graphics behind him and sort of set the tone for what that is. And then Verizon has a stellar in-house team that just can run with work. They create their own work too. It's not that we always set the standard and someone else runs with it. They do a great job of creating work on their own too. And then we have moments where we can kind of mix things up for seasonal opportunities, like Valentine's Day, where we played up the XOXO, and the source Verizon red is there, but we're playing around with colors. And this didn't appear just on their website. If you went to their stores, you saw that they had a lot of displays that had this graphic scheme. And then, this is something we definitely didn't do, but it's so incredible to see. And that's that little check mark that we designed on our computers and sent, vector artwork to Verizon. They made it into a store, and it looks like this check mark is 20 feet tall and holding up the sides of the ceiling. And it's just incredible to see how something as simple as a logo and a few simple assets like a typeface and colors can be, can be used as the source for designing a space. And so I hand it to Verizon and their other partners for sort of making the brand come to life in so many ways beyond what we originally designed. Or there might be kind of like, some promotional event, kind of temporary installation that has to do with the promotion of something new. In this case, it's a 5G installation, a 5G network. And I have to give credit to our partner in London, Daniel Weil, whose team is heading up a lot of packaging design for Verizon and has done a stellar job, has been there since early days of our working with them. And so if you are a Verizon customer and you either go to one of their Verizon stores or you're mailed a box and you open up the box and realize there's something beautiful on the inside, the packaging looks great, it's a great unboxing experience, you can thank Daniel, our partner in London, for doing that. And we work hand in hand with his team to put graphics on the beautiful packaging that he puts together. And also, the London office sometimes does a little bit of product design, but we also have to think a lot about how the brand appears in products that appear in people's homes or in their offices. And something that's just very satisfying is to see a CEO of one of the country's largest telecommunications companies standing on stage, giving a keynote, a lecture, and just has the Verizon check over his heart, right? So I sort of think few CEOs actually do this, particularly telecommunications company. And their leader, CEO Hans Vestberg, is really a good champion of the brand. And then perhaps the most satisfying thing for maybe any graphic designer who's designed a logo would be physically making that logo out of fabricating it and then making it 20 feet tall and putting it inside a warehouse and then lighting it. This is when this image came out around the time of the rebrand, and I just remember our team being in awe of this particular rendering. It's not real, but we wish it were. So I'd like to spend the rest of my time talking to you guys about a project that was originally an internal campaign that Verizon had us work on, right? So this isn't something that was meant for the public to see. And I think a lot of times, if the idea that you're an agency and working with a larger company is that you're always just creating work that's being visible and feeding the eyeballs of the customers. But in this case, this is more about like a project that had to do with the company culture and supporting those that are within the company and giving them incentives and also giving everybody a big mission to work towards, right? So this is work that we did at the end of last year. And so I'm going to walk you through kind of the process we went through. So, so sometimes you get briefs like this, which are, that sound like this. Design visual expressions for our new purpose that will energize and propel Verizon team members and stakeholders into the next era of the brand. So when we received this brief toward the end of last year, October, so I was completely flummoxed. Okay, I know what a visual expression is. I don't know what a purpose is. And I get that people need to be energized and propelled into the next era of the brand. It sounded like a big ask, but I just fully didn't quite get it. And so what it all boiled down to, I kind of want to give you an idea of what like a kind of concise form of a brief looks like. And the idea here essentially was that kind of what I described earlier. The company has a new purpose, a new mission, and they want to energize their teams and get them focused on the work ahead and get them, everyone on the same page and get them excited about the work that they do, while at the same time giving them incentives for being good employees. And so that brief in one sentence sort of, they boil it down to this one phrase, kind of like a tagline of sorts. They call it the purpose, which is we create the networks that move the world forward. And so the important word here is networks, right? So of course they physically make and provide the networks that we use to participate in lectures like this. I'm on the Verizon network right now talking to you guys, but also the human networks, right? Connecting people. The idea that their work physically connects people and ideas and brings them together, and they want to support all those networks. And it's sort of the human quality of what they do. When so often telecommunications companies can feel like a sort of a service company, right? Or they're just a utility that we have to pay. They want to be more supportive of the networks that the world has in connecting people. And so the shorthand for this, kind of the hashtag, so to speak, for this purpose is called Forward Together. So we came up with 3 directions. We treat it just like any client, right? If it's an identity project, we come up with multiple options. If it's a book project, we come up with sample spreads of various directions. So Verizon, even though we're working with them constantly every day on a dozen projects at once, we still treat it exactly the same way. And I'll withhold showing you, I really would love to show you the 2 other directions that weren't chosen. We like to keep those a little close to the vest because who knows, we might be able to repurpose them for other projects. But they were cool, but the end result was actually the best solution, I think. So, and coming, like any designer starting off with a blank slate, you're like, well, okay, there's that one long phrase, we create the networks that move the world forward, but Forward Together has a nice concise quality to it. And what if we trimmed it down even further than that, just said forward? And the word forward itself has this momentum to it, right? Like just give the graphic designer this word and let them run with it. They'll come up with a bunch of different executions on it. So, we're in favor of big, dumb ideas. So we figured, hey, the word forward, what if we made it italic and made it super forward, right? It looks like it's being propelled forward. And so, okay, that's great, but what else you got? So we kind of wondered, all right, well, maybe italic typography would be a distinctive looking asset to use for this campaign, specifically for this internal campaign. And maybe it's, not just, and that we could, maybe it's all italic. It's something we've never done with Verizon before. And so we started thinking, well, why don't we put the check mark next to it? Well, what happens? And because, the check mark kind of has that angularity, right? The same as the italic typeface. But on close inspection, they're like, couldn't be further away from each other, right? They're 14 degrees away. So when you ask a graphic designer to do type design, they go up to the top panel of their InDesign program and they hit the skew button, right? And in this case, I did simple math. And what's so funny is InDesign tells you this is false italic, right? So this is how we managed to get the idea across to Verizon, right? And so magically, the angle of the check mark, which is 25 degrees, and this new type treatment are magically parallel, right? So hey, it looks like that's forward, but the name, the shorthand's Forward Together. So what's Forward Together look like? It looks like that. So mission accomplished, right? Like, okay, the type is matching the angle of the check mark. The trouble is the type looks terrible. It looks like we went to the skew button and skewed it 14 degrees. It just doesn't look like proper typography. So the idea here is that, on the right's what we did, right? It's our fake italic, but we really want the italic to be more like the original italic, just slanted more, right? So we try our hand with this stuff, but moments like this call for calling a professional. So we called up Monotype, who's worked with Verizon a lot in the past, and there's even a Verizon cut of Neue Hospitalsk that we use. But anytime there's something special we need done to the typeface, we go to Monotype, with the official licensors of Neue Hospitalsk. And we called them up and said, hey, we've got this launch of a new program coming up in about a month, and we need to create a bunch of different graphic assets for this big launch. We need t-shirts, we need banners. The internal audience, the folks at Verizon are going to throw a big party for this new campaign that they've got. And we need a new typeface. Can you help us? And so we worked with type designer Carl Crossgrove, who's on the West Coast, and we walked him through our version of the typeface, and he said, nice try, I'll take it from here. And we talked to him on a Friday afternoon. The following Tuesday, he had his first run at it, and sent us over, and it was unbelievably close to what it should be. And there was a lot of back and forth with him, like, hey, the Q looks kind of wonky, or the S looks bulbous here. Can you make it look like this? It's just fun. If you've never worked with a type designer before, I encourage you to do so, because they're so similar yet so different. And it was a pleasure to work with, and really made it fun for us. We did it so quickly and so well. And so the result is a custom typeface called NHG Super Italic. And it's a full functioning typeface that Verizon has at their disposal, and that they use at this point specifically for this internal campaign. And what we love about the italic forward motion of this is that the type doesn't want to be flush left, right? It kind of wants to be just staggered and sort of active, which is so different from the rest of the work that we do for Verizon. And what we really like to do is sort of make it look staggered and that it has movement, but we still like to create some internal alignments, right? So we have letters sort of lining up vertically at the slant. So that's sort of the trick with this typeface. And we purposefully, didn't make lowercase letters, because it would have been a bit more complicated, and the fear that if someone used upper and lowercase, it could really look messy. But also uppercase letters have a nice vertical quality to them, so we could really play into that angularity. And so I'm going to do a little before and after here. Before, that's me stretching it. After. It looks like such subtle moves, but when you actually use it in the old version versus the actual properly drawn version, it's a world of difference. And typography is all about small details and sweating those details. And while it seems just like a little jiggle, like when these letters are dancing, it's not that different. There actually is a big difference between the two. And I hand it to Carl for doing such a great job. And Carl was very open to us taking the opportunity to do things that are more what a graphic designer would do versus what a type designer would do. We kind of made sure that the W and the A were perfectly parallel, right, when they typically aren't. And also the word forward has a WA in it, so we had to make sure those letters were just right. And the pound sign, the hashtag, is the same angle as the rest of the typeface, and that's not common too. It's usually a little bit more upright. And the horizontal bars, like on the numbers 5 and 7, are the same height. So everything, the idea here is that everything just sort of like feels locked in and graphic, and there's not, like an accommodation made to the typeface so that it can be used at a bunch of different sizes. This is a display typeface, and when we want those letters sort of coming together, we want them to just like magically just pair beautifully. So that's what Carl did for us, and here's a sample of a few of those pairs. So here's the resulting kind of logo for the campaign, Forward Together. So different from what I showed you earlier. We're kind of making sure it always has to be locked up with that check mark to really make sure that that idea that this angle of the type matches the era of the check mark is like, we saw that pretty hard. So I'm going to show you some different applications of it. Here's the longer form of their purpose. We create the networks that move the world forward. And now I have to be honest, if left in the wrong hands, this typeface can look pretty hairy. So we made sure that when we handed it to them that only professional card carrying graphic designers were in control of it. So, but we'll see what happens with time. We found that many of the employees really love it and are latching onto it. And we're into messing with the scale of the typography too, and how that messes around with the check mark. And this idea that this typeface is dynamic. It's not meant to be flush left, shove it in the upper left-hand corner on the grid. This is meant to have some movement and activity and some momentum to it. Some more type treatments. Ooh, 25 degrees, the angle of attack here. And then I'll show you some applications. Here are some t-shirts, you know, the two kind of primary graphics for the campaign, but also they let us make some more like just cool t-shirts, band t-shirts, graphic tees. And you know, these look like fake, but these are real t-shirts that they made. And what's fun is to be on Zoom calls with Verizon folks and they're wearing these t-shirts from home. Like they could be at home in their pajamas, but they're wearing their Verizon t-shirts. So there's a lot of brand love internally in their office culture. And so it's a proud moment for us at Pentagram to not only create work that we think is good, but also is you know, making people enjoy their jobs even more, and that, you know, they're contributing to the world in a better way. And then there's water bottles, posters to use inside of their headquarters in Basking Ridge, New Jersey, or in their offices downtown near the World Trade Center. You know, those freestanding banners kind of thing. You're seeing how the type kind of morphs and is used in different ways. This is a sort of thing where the words, type of project where the words that were used were really important. So, and often kind of hard to use imagery for the campaign, like what's the appropriate image to use without seeming to like what stock photo seems appropriate. So this is all about type. And so we made sure that the type that we're using is really distinctive. Okay, so here's like the big day of the big reveal. You know, this is the CEO of the company revealing to the leadership, the top 300, hey, there's a new campaign we have that's sort of our driving force behind everything that we do at Verizon. And so the day of that event in New Jersey, they blanketed the whole room with the typeface and graphics that correlated with the campaign. Really cool to see. And then here's their CEO telling everyone it's called Forward Together, and here's, you know, and he too had a t-shirt on at the same time with the graphic on it. And the best part of the entire, you know, I watched it live, him sort of unveil it. And so he's given this long spiel about like the new purpose, what it means, how it affects everyone in that room, and then everyone that works below them. And he says, so that's our new purpose. And then he said, and you can see also that the shape of the check is the same as the text. This is why I come into work every day. And so, of course, he was joking and everyone laughed, but then they also applauded. And so it sort of means that like internally there's a recognition that design plays a big role in the work that they do, and that every little detail matters. And when the CEO of a company pays attention to those details and mentions it in the first few minutes of his, you know, big reveal of a big campaign, it means something. So it makes all of our work worthwhile. And so I'll show you some more real footage of that day. Here's Hans again. There's the CMO who we worked with originally on the redesign of the identity, redesign the logo at a big leadership conference at the beginning of this year. And, you know, they're sort of taking it and using that typeface to brand something different. Again, that was a leadership kickoff. It was internal, so they had permission to use it in that case. Some more kind of environmental work that's used throughout their headquarters in Basking Ridge, New Jersey. And you also see too some of the other work we do. Verizon is celebrating their 20th anniversary this year, or 2020, started in year 2000. And so we sometimes come up with customized, rarely do this, custom logos for them. In this case, did you know that 20 was magically hidden inside the Verizon logo? We didn't either, but we found out this year. And there's also, you know, all sorts of swaggy kind of things, extensions of this program where, yeah, I mentioned earlier that there's an employee incentive program. So if someone's performing really well, they get this coin with the graphic on it. So, you know, these are, you know, files we make in our little computers and we send it off and we hope it goes well. And then they take off. Verizon is a company that makes stuff happen. So I found all these images on their Instagram account. So it's kind of like it's fun to contribute to their world and hopefully make the people that work within that organization have a little bit better time doing their work, and that the work is more fulfilling to them. And so, hey, there's that guy receiving a coin. And finally, just a kind of final note here. As designers, we're often, you know, asked to do something for a very specific project, right? And we release it and we hope it goes well. And once it's out there, it's sort of out of our control, right? And sometimes it's out of your control in a bad way, and sometimes it's in a good way. Sometimes it evolves and becomes something bigger than what it is originally thought to be. And in these very trying times, you know, the words "forward together" really resonate with all that our country's going through. And so the idea that the only way we're going to get through this tough time, is to do it together, that it's not on one person or group of people. It takes everybody in this to fix the problem. And so I leave you with that. And thank you for letting me chat, and I look forward to the Q&A.
Great. Thank you so much, Britt. That was fantastic. If anyone has questions, feel free to put them in the chat window. We are running up against the break, so I think we only have time for 1 or 2 questions for you, but we can certainly follow up with answers to any others. So one quick comment is we are having the Zoom background contest, so I think you've got to put the check mark in your background.
All right, I'll do that. All right, I'll see what I can do, how I can change the check mark between now and then.
So at the end, you made the comment around the Forward Together campaign, and it struck me throughout your presentation that that was very timely given what we're going through today. And I'm curious whether Verizon is doing anything intentional to move that campaign forward during this time, or whether the way it exists today is, or the way it existed is kind of
Sure. No, they definitely have. And yeah, you're right. I mean, we designed this at the end of last year. This was pre-COVID. This is pre what's happening now with social injustice in our country and riots. They didn't intend for it to be that big. They did have some ideas that it could be attached to corporate responsibility, social responsibility. And so we knew that could be a thing that they used. But they've definitely taken this thing as an overarching theme that can kind of be applied in a bunch of different ways. And earlier this week, on the 1st, Verizon used, that under the kind of umbrella of this campaign, they donated $10 million to 7 different organizations that have to do with social justice and fixing the racial problem we have in our country. So I know that they're doing that, and that was just this week. And they're certainly doing things with COVID. They've been busier than ever in COVID. During the lockdown, everyone's on their network and working. So they've been they've adapted to that really, really well. And so it's been interesting to see how they work through all of this. And it makes you proud to work with a company that makes moves like that.
Okay, great. And so another question that's shifting in a different direction. Your team talked about how they were really inspired by seeing the check mark in a storefront or in that fully fabricated version. So I'm curious, from your perspective, in a digital environment, where does that check mark excite you the most when you see it not in a physical form?
Yeah, good question. Well, maybe this seems trite, but like there's nothing more satisfying than seeing like a commercial with your work on it, right? Or Super Bowl. They participate in Super Bowl every year. Like they have big ads that run, so it's very satisfying to see that sort of resolve in a nice way at the end of a good commercial. But also, I mean, they do such great like just digital work. They're a digital company, right? They're a tech company in a way, and so much of the work is animated. I didn't show it today because we know animations don't work all that well on Zoom meetings, but so much of the work is active and in motion. I didn't show any of it, but I love seeing that work, the movement of the very static mark that we made come to life. That's very satisfying to see. And it's satisfying to see other partners, agency partners that Verizon works with, just take it to the next level. Or even internally, we have reviews with them all the time about, let's talk about the work we've done over the past 6 months. And their teams will show us things, and they just blow us away every time. So it's nice to have a lot of a collaboration between a bunch of really good designers on a bunch of different teams.
Okay. Perfect. Well, thank you. And yeah, if I see some other questions coming in. I think we are going to go to the break now, but we will get those to you. And definitely, you can respond directly. So thank you again, Britt. Great presentation.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks for participating.